Yeah, welcome everyone. I think you know already Riley O'Toole from Shakespeare in the Parks and formerly from Poetry Out Loud, state finals, but
Uh,
oh,
next
I'm
year.
sorry.
Next year.
Last time, I won't tease you anymore. But thank you for being here to work with our competitors. And especially today, I thought like maybe we could actually kind of workshop some of their poems. I think
Yeah,
you probably did that last time a little bit too, but I had to jump off early. But this is a chance for you to give each other feedback and then to hear the kinds of feedback that you can get from Riley also, and Kaisa too. So yeah, we can just kind of make it what you need, especially since it's such a small group today.
totally. Yeah. Yeah, I want to give everyone some resources and those that are watching this later on, it's all of you heading to the finals now, give you some tools to continue improving. It can be easy to kind of like, oh, I got my poem memorized and have successfully, recited it, but finding some ways to kind of take it to the next level. And yeah, good to see you, Zane and Jasper, tuning in here. Yeah, we can maybe talk specifically about your poems. Finding specific examples with your poems will actually help everyone understand their poems better. But maybe I'll jump on into some things that are good to keep in mind for everyone. Um, unless Kaisa, you want to say anything here to start?
Go for it. Go for it, Riley.
Okay. All right. Well, um, just want to remind everybody about articulation, and practicing articulation, and that it can become even easier now that you've memorized a poem and you've maybe internalized it and you have some patterns with how you're reciting it, to maybe have memorized some habits that aren't helpful when it comes to, say, final consonants. Even though you've recited the poem hundreds of times now and you have it, so deeply in your brain, you want to remember what it's like for those hearing it for the first time. First time. So remembering final consonants, even just, not overdoing it, but making sure you're being clear, so that everyone can understand what you're saying. It's super helpful, especially if you want us to come along the journey that the poem takes with you. So final consonants, and these are something, get a fresh copy of your poem. Yeah, not one that you've already scribbled on a bunch or kind of worked with a bunch. A fresh copy, and go through and just circle all those final consonants at the end of words, and practice a version where you overdo it. You really enunciate each individual consonant. Um, it sounds ridiculous and it's super silly, but just like athletes lift weights or do specific exercises or training, the exercise will ultimately help you make the poem clearer, and keep those things in mind. Even just how I said just mind just now instead of my, like letting the end of thoughts trail off, especially so not only in individual final consonants, but especially the ones at the end of a verse line. If your poem is divided into verse lines, I know some are not, but keeping that in mind. And then also consonants, but also vowels, thinking about opportunities you may have to use the sounds in words, to emphasize or make more specific something that is important to the poem or your point of view on a specific word. Diphthongs, which are
Mhm.
sounds that combine two separate vowels, like an A or an I or an O. You can use that sound to really express a specific point of view on that word. So a word like gross, um, can help you convey the meaning. And so the idea is not that you're overdoing every word, but can help you get specific and make some specific choices, that help us. Something I'll say again and again is, the enemy of a good performance is hypnotizing us, and it's a trap of poetry, especially say if your poem is in um, in verse, and it has a natural rhythm to it, and it, like for us out there judging and for anyone listening, and you listen to a bunch of poems, it can start to kind of hypnotize you and make it easy to almost tune out. So variety, anything that helps you mine your poem for variety in how you're expressing it. Again, without doing anything over the top. Um, that goes for pace as well. So you're automatically, when you're nervous, especially at the state competition, you're going to get up there, you're going to be nervous, you're automatically going to want to go faster. So I say automatically bring it down 15%. Um, but practice, just like I mentioned with articulation, practice different versions. Practice a version where you go as slow as you could possibly imagine saying the poem, do a version where you go as fast as possible, and then find those lines that are maybe served by taking them a little bit slower. Or, you know what? Gosh, I really like this pause after this line. I think it would be good for me to take a pause here for emphasis. And that pause really lands if I have a lot of pace going into the line before. Um, again, this is the next step, not just memorizing, but interpreting the poem. Yeah, you get to make choices when it comes to your delivery, and variety is something that can be really helpful to the ear and staying tuned into what you're saying. Um, think about rhythm. I mentioned not hypnotizing us with the same rhythm over and over, over and over again. When you're looking at, if there's a natural structure to your poem, how it's laid out on the page, do you follow that structure and take a breath after each line? Or is the poem served by moments of running through to the next line and making it to the end of the thought? Again, you can make choices with all of these things, but try to get specific and not make the poem all the same. Um, yeah. Pauses. I mean, kind of mentioned, again, balance with pauses, not taking too long of pauses. And the more pauses you use, the less impact each individual pause is going to have. Um, so consider that. Um, but practice different versions, things and different pauses will land differently. Like I mentioned, depending on the pace you're working with before and after, you just don't want to be too predictable because we stop listening if the poem is the same and you have the same intonation and the same rhythm and the same volume and throughout, um, when listening to a lot of poems, you want to be thinking about what's helping the listener who's hearing it for the first time. Um, physicality. So um, think about specifically about what you're doing with your body and how that is helping you communicate what you want to with the poem. I'd say overall, like I advise restraint. Yeah, less is more when it comes to emphasis. Just like with pausing, um, just like with, all those kind of rhythm changes, variety is great, and but don't want to overdo it. So think about what your physical home on stage is going to be. Are you going to stand with your arms at your sides the whole time? Are you going to come on stage and this is something else that I'll talk about in a second, but routine from beginning to end. So you're not just thinking about the poem, but thinking about and visualizing every moment you come up on stage, you adjust the mic, you take a deep breath. You want to rehearse all of those things. You want to rehearse the moment after as well, because um, even though we're focusing on the judges are focusing on grading the poem, um, your individual performance begins the moment we see you on stage. And so even if your poem is maybe about something super serious or dramatic, it doesn't mean you can't come on stage um, with excitement and with joy to have this opportunity to be smiling at, being in front of your peers from across the states, or even just smiling, at how, how crazy it is to be up on stage in front of a bunch of people, to be reciting a poem, the bravery that takes. Allow yourself, as Monica mentioned, to let joy come into it, even if your poem is super serious. But yeah, again, back to what I was saying, physicality. Um, so it could be that, you have you know, your hands at your sides, or maybe your hands live here. But you don't want to be doing too much, and you don't want to be there's a difference between using your hands for emphasis and for clarity, and giving yourself choreography. You don't want to give yourself choreography, and you don't want to be demonstrating. So the idea is not that like I walked to my house. Yeah, we don't we don't need that for the poem. But again, just as I talked earlier about, those moments of maybe I didn't mention discovery. Um, but when you're thinking about maybe why there's a pause in a particular spot, there's something that you, as the speaker of the poem, are experiencing, and if you're experiencing a particular feeling, yeah, if you're have your hands at your sides, but there is what you might consider to be the climax of the poem or a really important moment that the speaker say they are overcome with emotion. Yeah, hands to your heart. I'm experiencing, the speaker is experiencing, love in this moment, or the speaker is bewildered. Yeah. Putting your hands where that emotion is being experienced can be a small gesture that adds clarity, and we do these things naturally when you're talking. You can start observing your teachers, how some people gesture more as they're talking, and some people gesture less, but you want to get really specific. Yeah, even though ultimately it wants to be, when you're reciting, it wants to seem um, off the cuff, and discovered in the moment. You want to rehearse each individual piece of that. Um, because over gesturing, just like, over pausing or making the same vocal choice too much, um, can kind of lead the listener to tune out. So find some natural movements that are that help. And a great exercise, just like I said with articulation, with practicing what your voice is doing in the poem, and overdoing that. Do a version where you're over articulating all of your consonants, and a version where you're using your vowels and exploring like, oh, well, what are some different ways of just kind of pulling the poem apart is going to help you deepen your learning. Same thing physically. Do a version where you like come up with a gesture for every word in the poem. Yeah, it's going to help you just kind of get it in your body a little more. It doesn't mean that you're going to end up doing that, but you might make a discovery where you like, because you gestured on every line, you really get out of your head and you discover that there is a really powerful gesture in one moment that you can make for the poem. Um, and then I recommend also practicing no gestures at all, hands at your side, um, and feel the power that the words have on their own. Yeah. So then that'll help you find kind of the balance in between. Um, we talked about routine. So with your routine, like I mentioned, physically what you're doing, I believe typically there's a sound check or a moment where the hosts will invite each of you up on stage beforehand to kind of do a mic test so you can kind of hear how your voice sounds in the mic and understand what the level is going to be and how close you need to be. And you want to practice physically. How do I walk on stage when a bunch of people are watching me? How do I adjust my mic? How do I take my deep breath, practicing all those physical things, but also practicing an internal cue for yourself, something that starts the poem, something that inspires you to say the first line. So maybe it's a question you have for yourself. Your poem is about um, you know, how much you love lemonade, and so in that first moment, as you take a deep breath, you're thinking to yourself, why is lemonade so great? And then you launch into the poem. Give yourself that thing that's um, so that we see you living in the story of the poem before it's even begun, if that makes sense. And the same thing with the end, nerves and everything, especially if you like stumble over your word during the poem. Um, you can get your head into that space of like, well, I messed it up and it's all over and I can't go back and well, I guess I'll try again next year. Um, Try to continue leaning into um, the joy of the experience, and it can be challenging not to spiral, but even if you are beginning to feel um, insecure in that moment about your performance, I promise you that what we are experiencing, watching and listening to your poem is much different than what you're experiencing internally. Because like I said, you know your poem much better than we do, and a small stumble may not ultimately make a difference. And you want to still make sure you land your poem, take a couple beats at the end. And I don't think it's customary to say thank you at the end. I don't think you need to say maybe Kaisa and
I know
Monica.
I'm not even sure they're allowed, to be
Yeah.
honest.
But just take a moment,
I
take a moment. You're in it, and then step back, or like you mentioned, that rehearsing that version of yourself that exists on stage both before and after. Return to, practice returning to I'm back to being Zane, and I'm gonna walk off stage proud of what I've accomplished by being brave and getting up on stage and reciting a poem, and I promise you you will you will be happy to have rehearsed those bits as well, not just the poem, because ultimately it's going to feel like every second you're up on stage from the moment you stand up out of your chair is you're going to feel the power of that opportunity, and the excitement and everything that goes into that. Nice. I'm not going to talk anymore on my own for now, because I'd love to hear if you all have any questions, or maybe we can just dive in to talking about your poems specifically, or maybe Kaisa have anything?
No, I don't have anything in particular. I think we sort of just wanted to use this opportunity for students to either recite some of their poem, and get feedback on that, or ask questions that they might have, or sort of just using this time as a sounding board, for you guys to sort of ask or take it where you want. That would be the most helpful for you. So, um, Jasper or Zane, do you guys have any questions or concerns or anything in particular that you're wanting to sort of dive into, or do you want to recite one of your poems? Yeah, Jasper.
Well, there's one spot in one of my poems that I'm kind of having trouble with. It's
Mm-hmm.
in um so it's the transition between these two lines from and the two lines are so run from the stars to you out so run from the stars till you are out of breath on a spring night, my lad. Um and the break is after breath.
Mm-hmm.
So run from the stars till you out of breath on a spring night, my lad. Um, I just I'm I'm not sure whether it's more customary to like pause between lines or to just kind of keep going in this kind of context. Um,
Yeah, there's so many options for how you could. Yeah, Kaisa, yeah.
I was gonna say I would practice the way it's written, and I would practice the way that sounds most natural to you, because the only people that have the poem in front of them are the accuracy judge and the prompter. No one else knows where your line breaks are. No one else knows where the poet might have intended for you to take a breath or take a pause. So I would really sort of practice whatever sounds most natural or most intentional to you when reciting the poem. That's my opinion, because no one's going to know if there is a break after breath or not unless you put that pause there. Um, I think sometimes we, when we're trying to memorize a poem, because poetry is also so much about visual sort of understanding, when you're actually reading the poem, the experience of hearing it can be much different. So I would say whatever feels like it's supposed to be in that moment for you is the way that you should do it, because no one's going to know if there's a line break. So if you feel like you should continue on with that sentence, then you should absolutely do that.
Yeah. You get to play with different options and see what's, feels good to you, and or record it different ways and listen to it back, and think about which version you like. I mean, just in thinking about the relationship between um how you're delivering something, and what it is you're delivering. I mean, thinking about the content of that line, I'd love to hear the two lines that lead into that, but um you're talking about being out of breath. And so it seems to me maybe an opportunity to continue through until the end of the thought. You're talking about being out of breath, and you're almost running out of breath on this line. Yeah, how that can maybe, how you were delivering that line can um, further help, get specific on what it is you're saying. What are the lines leading up to that?
Um, the two lines before are actually just at the beginning of the poem, which is kind of handy. There is a star whose bite is certain death, while the moon but makes you mad. So run from the stars till you are out of breath on a spring night, my lad.
Yeah, so this is a great example of a poem that has a natural rhythm to it, and I can kind of I imagine that they're laid out in verse lines. Um, so you don't have much time at the top of that poem to have really established any rhythm necessarily. You only have two lines leading into this line. Um, but I do think it's an opportunity to explore. We call it an enjambment, when you're running a line into the next, is the technical term for, or at least how we talk about it in performance. And I think it is
Interesting.
an opportunity to run through. You have your first line, second line, third line into fourth line. Yeah, and then what's the line? Can you give us the next four that come after that?
Just the rest of the poem.
Great.
On a spring night, my lad, or slip among the shadows of a pine, and hide face down from the sky, and never stir, and never make a sign until the wild star goes by.
That's great. I mean, so you have such a um, that's the whole poem. You have such a compact, so that there's so many different ways you can pull this apart and play with it. Um, there was already something I was hearing in that, so we could call it a quatrain, I guess. That I believe it's the second line of that quatrain. So there's a natural da 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 da, but that line was da da da. What's the word? Just give me the second line of the quatrain again.
And hide face down from the sky.
Face down. And hide face down. Yeah. So instead of kind of being in that rhythm, which the poem naturally wants you to um, get in with how it's laid out, that da-dum, ba-bum, ba-bum. We call it,
Not iambic.
iambic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, face down is an opportunity to mix up the rhythm of that particular line. And so you, instead of saying and hide face down and da da da, you have an opportunity to go and hide face down. And then I would bet you those words that follow have an opportunity to be less stressed as a result. Can you just read that line again?
And hide face down from the sky.
Yeah, right. So even though that line in its natural format would have unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, you have an opportunity to mix that up and still have the same amount of stressed syllables. So you end up with the balance, if that makes sense. Yeah. And hide face down from the sun. Yeah. So it's an opportunity to, so that's a kind of exactly what we're talking about when we're saying find ways to mix it up. So you have your first two, um, and I mean the brilliant poets do this naturally. Um, yeah. Can you just read the whole
Well, I
thing?
think, oh yeah,
Sorry,
go ahead.
go ahead. You have something, Kaisa?
No, Jasper can read and then I'll say something.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Okay. There is a star whose bite is certain death, while the moon but makes you mad. So run from the stars till you are out of breath. On a spring night, my lad. See, I actually run out of breath there, which is the problem. There is a star whose bite is certain death, while the moon but makes you mad. So run from the stars till you are out of breath on a spring night, my lad. Or slip among the or slip or slip among the shadows of a pine and hide face down from the sky, and never stir and never make a sign until the wild star goes by. I clearly need to work on articulation.
Oh, it sounds great. I this is so helpful because it allows us, thank you for being brave and sharing your poem with us, because it allows us to talk about some specific things. Kaisa, I know you got something, but I'll keep going here. Something that I didn't mention specifically that is really helpful as we're trying to track the story of the poem is transition words, like what's the part of speech? A conjunction? Um, like you have a so in the middle of your poem that really takes us from the first quatrain to the second. Um, and so in helping us track the thought, um, maybe give that a little bit more, don't rush it. If that makes sense. And then another thing that I noticed just from this last time through that's helpful for this poem and lots of other poems, you've got so many great verbs. You just go through and circle all your action words that are doing something. Slip, hide, yeah. Making sure that those words are receiving some emphasis actually helps us track what the speaker is I guess inspiring us to do. Um, yeah. And then I would say, and I've mentioned this before, you know, find how it can be discovered. So we don't, when you say the first line of the poem, or when you say it for yourself, try to find a practice where like you can give yourself room to discover the second line. Um, if that makes sense. So what are the first two lines again?
There is a star whose bite is certain death, while the moon but makes you mad.
Great. So when I say discovery, so you're talking about there is a star. Sorry, one more time for me.
There is a star whose bite is certain death, while the moon but makes you mad.
Ah, okay. So you're comparing two things. So when you're trying to help us, you're comparing what the star does versus what the moon does. Yeah. And so something I don't think I talked specifically about. We talked about articulation, um, but thinking and pace and rhythm, but thinking about your pitch, and how we in when we're speaking, we naturally set things against each other to help make them clear. Do you want to go to the store or do you want to go out to a restaurant? Yeah. So thinking about the music of that, do 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 do. Do, 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 do. Yeah. It comes down to this or that. Yeah. We use pitch to set them against each other. So I would recommend for clarity, yes, doing as much as you can, and you can really overdo it in practice. There is a star versus there is a moon. Yeah, what are those? How do those two things do something differently? Like I mentioned before, finding ways to make it without getting too extreme so that you don't settle into the same, same level throughout. That kind of doesn't help us hear it or make it as clear. Um, great. Sorry, guys, I talked for a while
No,
there.
you're good. You're good. No, I was just going to say, because I think this is a good example, because Jasper, your poem is so small and compact. And it is a perfect example, I think, of a lot of the poems that are in the anthology this year, which are from like a certain time period. They're very formulaic. They rely on music and sound a lot. And I think probably you might have picked up on that, like at regionals, that there is a certain music to a lot of the poems that are being memorized and recited this year. But I think that also the hiccup you're having, or we're having with those two lines, is as the poet, this person is sort of committed to a certain form, whereas you, as the person reciting the poem, have the opportunity to say it and emphasize and draw our attention as the listener to any part in any sort of rhythm or, I guess, pace that you think is most impactful for that poem itself. Because the poet writing it is like, I have to rhyme, these two lines, this many syllables, and in a quatrain, and then I have to repeat that. And so you don't have to do that, even though it sounds that way, and our natural sort of falling into place with the rhythm of each line. If you feel like you need to connect something or pause even in the middle of a line to draw emphasis on the comparison, you're allowed to do that. So if that's helpful when you're trying to sort of find your way through whatever line or stanza, however it feels best in, I guess, um, showing us the poem, because your poem has a lot of imagery in it, and even though it's short, you are sort of painting these two pictures, this great overarching landscape to the personal. And so I think, whatever you can do to sort of um, connect those two together for the listener is helpful.
Totally. Having a, helping make them clear, but also having a point of view on, like how do you as the speaker feel about what the moon or what the star's bite does versus the moon. Did I mix those up? The moon's
Nope,
bite.
that's right.
Um, great. Maybe we jump in. Zane, how do you feel about sharing some of your poem with us?
I could share one. Which one do you want to hear?
Oh my gosh, whichever one is your favorite.
Okay, I gotta pull it up because it's my third poem. So, do you want me to just recite the whole thing?
Yes, please. That'd be awesome to start.
Home Sweet Home by Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. Sharers of a common country, they had met in deadly strife. Men who should have been as brothers madly sought each other's life. In the silence of the even, when the cannon's lips were dumb, thoughts of home and all its loved ones to the soldier's heart would come. On the margin of a river, mid the evening's dews and damps, could be heard the sounds of music rising from two hostile camps. One was singing of its section, down in Dixie, Dixie's land, and the other of the banner, waved too long from strand to strand. In the lawn where Dixie's ensign floated over the hopeful slave, rose the song that freedom's banner, starry lighted, long might wave. From the fields of strife and carnage, gentle thoughts began to roam, and a tender strain of music rose with words of home, sweet home. Then the hearts of strong men melted, for amid our grief and sin, still remains that touch of nature, telling us we are all kin. In one grand but gentle chorus, floating to the starry dome, came the words that brought them nearer, words that told of home, sweet home. For a while, all strife forgotten, they were only brothers then, joining in the sweet old chorus, not as soldiers, but as men. Men whose hearts would flow together, though apart their feet might roam, found a tie they could not sever in the memory of each home. Never may the steps of carnage shake our land from shore to shore, but may mother, home, and heaven be our watchwords evermore.
Awesome. That's an intense poem.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but there's so many opportunities to, get specific with the journey that you take us on in that poem. Um, you're already like bringing such great point of view and such great like you're allowing it to affect your voice, and even as you're like kind of reading it on your computer now, I see it affecting your body. So that's a good sign. Like let that push you, but as you're, experiencing that and feeling that, ultimately I think you want to find a spot with it where it's not all intense, it's not all the poem's going to want to do that to you automatically because you're talking about some some wild stuff going on, some intense stuff. So where are the moments, you have this all the strife and all the carnage, and how do you set all of that against the hope and the hopeful moments that you're talking about? And how does that shift in your voice and in the way you're reciting it into a different cadence almost? There is an intensity that you talk about, the intense stuff with, and there's the beginning of it almost sounds like, I was in like a, you know, movie trailer, for the battlefield. I mean, it's like reminding me, I was just recently watching the new Ken Burns, the Revolutionary War documentary. Um, and anyways, that's super effective, but you want to find the other colors that are within there. And again, like Kaisa was saying, another poem that has a natural rhythm that it will want to get you into, especially because it rhymes each line. So you find yourself like um, getting locked into the same rhythm and driving, no words have importance other than the word that rhymes. And all the rest of it just drives to the next word that rhymes. So finding ways to um, pull that apart and play with some different things, I think are great. But one of those things we've talked about is point of view. And so you're already got some great um, point of view on what's going on in the poem. Something we mentioned when we were looking at Jasper's poem is those action words, those verbs, and how if you, as an exercise, naturally try to emphasize those words, it will help you help us track the thought usually. And so I picked up on one early on in the poem that I think will help you make it clear for us. Um, madly sought. Yeah, I mean, madly is such a great word for what you're describing at the beginning, and I understand like you want to emphasize like they were all mad, they were in this state of mind, but um, for us in imagining and tracking the story of the poem and thinking about what is actually happening, that making it clear to us that they were seeking something and emphasizing madly sought. Yeah, make sure you hit sought. And then great images, like I mentioned about like, the point of view and the intensity on some of this stuff. That's good. But just get specific, whether it's intense or not intense. If you're talking about a river, get specific in your head with exactly what that river looks like. Because once you're memorized, if you're able to, really like discover these images out in the audience, yeah, or just get specific and really see it in your mind's eye, that helps us each see our own river as well. Um, yeah. Uh, Kaisa, you got anything?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, maybe we just take a little chunk of it again. Um, thanks so much, Zane. Yeah, maybe let's just start at the top again and maybe give us um, a third of it. And we
The
can
other
talk.
thing, Riley, is
Yeah.
they do have other poems too, and I don't know, depending on how much time we have, w- you know, not to insert myself too much, but you know,
Yeah.
we have a
We
few
can.
more minutes if they're wanting feedback on their other poems, I guess.
Yeah. What's helpful, y'all? Are you eager to share a different poem? Talk about a different poem?
I could talk about my first poem.
Let's talk about let's give time for one more of your poems and then let's jump into another poem of Jasper's if Jasper's cool with that. Great. Okay. Yeah. Dive on in, give us another poem. Um, and you know what would be great too is if y'all kind of didn't just do the poem, but do what you're going to do when you recite it, which is say the title and the author, right? Before?
Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine in your mind that you've just come up to the mic, you've just gotten settled. Give us your breath and your author title and then go into the poem.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready, Zane.
Okay. Sorry about that. Conscience by Henry David Thoreau. Conscience is instinct bred in the house. Feeling and thinking propagate the sin by natural breeding in and in. I say, turn it outdoors into the moors. A love of life whose plot is simple and does not thicken with every pimple. A soul so sound, no sickly conscience binds it, that makes the universe no worse than it finds it. I love an earnest soul, whose mighty joy and sorrow are not drowned in a bowl and brought to life tomorrow, that lives one tragedy and not 70. A conscience worth keeping, laughing, not weeping, a conscience wise and steady, and forever ready, not changing with events, dealing in compliments, a conscience exercised about large things where one may doubt. I love a soul not all of wood, predestinated to be good, but true to the backbone unto itself alone, and false to none. Born to its own affairs, its own joys, and own cares, by whom the work which God begun is finished and not undone. Taking up where he left off, whether to worship or to scoff. If not good, why then evil? If not good God, good devil. Goodness, you hypocrite, come out of that. Live your life, do your work, and take your hat. I have no patience towards such conscientious cowards. Give me simple laboring folk who love their work, whose virtue is a song to cheer God along.
Nice. Thanks, Zane. You got a lot of energy, don't you?
Yeah,
It's great. I mean, that's like I feel the energy, and that helps me as a listener lean in and want to hear what comes next. Um, and so I'm seeing that same intensity, and um it's challenging, these things we're talking about doing, and taking it to the next step, and um one of the things that makes learning verse, and especially rhyming verse, so much easier than learning, blank prose, is the rhymes almost help, you know. And so it can be hard to um shake that rhythm when you get into trying to find some different colors. So right now that poem has a real strong rhythm, and it's dominating throughout, and it's you have a gear you shift into the end where we ratcheted up the intensity, and got, pace was quickened, and I think that's effective. But I think, just like with the other one, we want to find some different colors. We want to find some poems that, or some lines that you really slow down and land, so that it can be more impactful when you do move more quickly through. So that the exercise I was talking about earlier, where you're going through and over articulating every word, giving every word importance, would be a good one to play with. Um, just find some different versions of each of those lines, in the rhythm, and how they're being recited, and right now, a lot of the pauses after each line are the same. So you do verse line, beat, verse line, beat, verse line, beat, verse line, beat. It kind of sped up at the end, verse line, beat, verse line, beat, verse line, beat. Um, and when that change happened, I immediately leaned in. And so we want to find those ways you can get those changes in there. There are some smaller, some of those words, even if they're not receiving emphasis, we still got to make some of those other words clear. So there are some moments where you're rushing through to the end of the line or the rhyming word, or you're doing a good job of recognizing maybe what the most important word is in a particular line. Um, but we still need to clearly understand the other words, if that makes sense. So that's when the articulation of those smaller words still is important, and so practicing that over articulation will be um, helpful. We talked about pitch a little while ago, and how we make things clear by setting them against each other. Yeah, or using our voice to say, I'm talking about this thing, and then I'm on to talking about this thing. And this thing is not that thing. Yeah, you're doing that really well already. There's a lot of great antithesis in there that you've done naturally, and helps make it clear. And I just want to encourage you to um, go further with that. Um, there was a moment too where and this is something where we, it's element of performance you can introduce. You almost because the rhythm is so strong in this poem, when you got to that word predestinated, I kind of liked how you almost over hit each one of those words to have fun with that rhythm, we wouldn't say predestinated, in that way, but because of the way that the rhythm was naturally happening. I mean, if you're doing that for emphasis, that can be effective. Um, but we want to get really specific with why we're doing that, and not just because this is the rhythm and I'm going to say predestinate, because I'm getting caught in the rhythm. We want to make sure that um, that's a choice. But great stuff. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, Kaisa. Oh, you're muted.
So, oh, it's turning everything on and off. The wind here is so terrible. Anyway, so this is an interesting poem because if you're looking at it on the page, versus hearing it, almost all of Thoreau's lines are, and they're ending in some sort of punctuation, but there are certain lines that continue on to the next. And it would be an interesting thing to maybe slow you down, Zane, if you're looking at the way that it's written, instead of being sort of so committed to the rhyming aspect of it. If you look at how the sentences are being formed, because that might help you pace yourself a little more, and then also sort of draw a different emphasis for the listener, instead of getting wrapped up in the music of the actual poem, because you have moments in here. Where are they? So let's see, I just had one. By whom the work which God begun, and then it breaks, right? But the sentence isn't done there. So if by whom the work which God begun is finished and not undone, you can break the second line with the punctuation. You don't have to break the line where the line break actually shows up on the page. So you might find that you're drawing slower moments for the reader or the listener to see if you start to sort of break it apart in a different way, because it also breaks up the music. So like a conscience exercised about large things, not a conscience exercised about large things where one may doubt, because one is connected to the line before, even though it's happening on the other line. So it just gives you a chance to sort of play with how are you not just delivering the words, but how are you creating the image for the person that doesn't have the poem in front of them. So if you tie certain sentences, if you keep them together, it might be easier for the the bigger picture of the poem to sort of come together and manifest for the person listening. Does that make sense? Where you don't have to be beholden to the rhythm of the poem. You can mix it up, because this is a very it's also not in a regular form. So you're not doing like with Jaspers where you're doing, you know, rhyme with 1 and 3, 2 and 4. This is like 3 lines rhyme, 2 lines rhyme, 4 lines rhyme, 2 lines rhyme, 3 lines rhyme. So you're not like you have a rhythm, but the rhythm is also irregular. So you're allowed to play with that.
Awesome. Should we hear a little bit of one of Jasper's other poems? Nice. Oh, hey, before you jump in, Jasper, one more thing. Zane, that was at the beginning, the breath that you took. Yeah. That was like it relaxes us watching somebody that is like, okay, here I go, here I go. I'm gonna give myself a sigh. We all relax with you. Yeah, when you do that. And if you can take it the next step further where that sigh happens maybe like right when you have to stand up from your chair in the audience. Okay, here I go. So that you can already be in that like I'm a man on a mission, and then you have your breath before the poem. Be less about like oh God, I got to release all of my stress, and more about like my breath's under me. I just walked up on stage without completely tripping and falling. Even if you do trip, it's okay. I've fallen on my face in front of people before. It's great. Everybody likes you even more when you do that because then nobody else has to worry about doing that. So you'd actually be everybody's hero if you um anyways, that was great. Thank you for taking that moment. I know it's silly rehearsing that, but I promise you the more you rehearse that, like imagining going, having your moment with the mic, adjusting it, breath, and go, it'll go smoother for you. Sorry. Okay, go ahead, Jasper.
Okay, so as far as this author, I'm not really sure how to pronounce her first name. Would it be Leonora or Leonora? Or
Lenora.
do we know? Okay, I'm just
How's it
Oh no.
spelled?
Probably Leonora.
Leonora.
What's the
Hmm.
one?
I'm
What's
pretty
the name of
sure
her?
it's Leonora.
Leonora?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty sure.
Leonora.
It looks like there's some, yeah, Leonora,
Leonora. Leonora.
the emphasis on nor.
Leonora. Okay.
Or yeah, or sometimes Lenora. Yeah, I think Monica's right about Leonora. Leonora. And also while we're at it, Thoreau or I think
Henry David
Zane.
Thoreau.
Yeah, we want to look at our what the emphasis of Thoreau is. Henry David Henry David Thoreau. Yes, not Henry David Thoreau or Thoreau. Or maybe I've heard Thoreau. No, it's Thoreau, yeah?
Thoreau.
I said Henry David Thoreau.
Okay, yeah. So I would, if you type it in online, say Thoreau pronunciation, you'll get some YouTube videos that'll say it for you and just practice saying that with the emphasis on the second syllable.
Okay,
Thoreau.
Thoreau.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh, Sweet. All right. Sorry, Jasper. Whenever you're ready.
Squall by Leonora. Leonora. Squall by Leonora Spare. The squall sweeps gray-winged across the obliterated hills, and the startled lake seems to run before it. From the wood comes a clamor of leaves tugging at the branches, no, tugging at the twigs, pouring from the branches, and suddenly the birds are still. Thunder crumples the sky, lightning tears at it, and now the rain, thudding, implacable, the wind reveling in the confusion of the great pines, and a silver sifting of light, a coolness, a sense of summer anger passing, of summer gentleness creeping nearer, penitent, tearful, forgiven.
Okay. What a lovely poem. Um, So that's a great example of like, one that is to me, I don't know, how's that laid out on the page? It's just all one block of text or is there a structure to it? Okay, yeah, there is. There's a cool. So
It's
that, yeah,
no, it's all mostly line breaks at punctuation, and
got it.
there's also some different punctuation in this poem that there's a lot of uh, em dashes, which I think you're doing a great job of sort of you're putting natural pauses where the poet is emphasizing the pause, but you're not like overdoing the pause where you're letting it build the image versus sort of making us question whether or not you're remembering your lines because sometimes that can happen. So I think that's you're doing a good job of being faithful to the way the poet has written the poem. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's great. Yeah, and there's variety already, so you don't have the trap of necessarily falling into a particular rhythm. Um, I would say that there's a lot of beautiful description in the poem. Um, and the challenge with that is finding ways to make all those images specific for yourself, and so they don't all get painted with the same quality of beauty. And you're not doing that, but that's the trap that exists there. Um, and so trust that um, trust that you're the goal is to communicate with specificity the beauty of those images and make them clear for us without demonstrating with your voice that they are beautiful too much. If that makes sense. I mean, that happens naturally when we're describing something that is so beautiful to us, like a beautiful sunset. I mean, our voice does change naturally. You're experiencing the beauty of that image, or oh, I love the taste of that burger. It's so good. Like it affects our voice. Um, but we just want to get really specific, because that can be, again, the thing kind of saying over and over again here is finding specificity and variety. And the one of the challenges with that poem is that it's just a wash of beauty. So finding, something we talk about in the acting world is finding the verb for each line, the what you're seeking to do to the person you're communicating with. So I am trying to could you give just like the first couple of lines for us? Oh,
The squall sweeps gray-winged across the obliterated hills, and the startled lake seems to run before it. From the wood comes a clamor of leaves, tugging at the twigs, pouring from the branches, and suddenly the birds are still.
great. Yeah, I mean there's all, like so much good. That time I just heard like how the poet is really making specific word choices on, almost to like help with the what's the twigs line, the two T's that are there.
Tugging at the twigs.
Yeah, tugging at the twigs. Use those T's. I mean, it almost helps illustrate. And words like sweeping, almost give you the sound of that wind sweeping across the. Um, but a point of view on this first section versus what comes next. That there is an element of, um, not fear, but um, I wouldn't. It's the opposite of peaceful. There is a like. What's that?
Trepidation.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. There's um, that's great, a specificity. But the trepidation versus full on fear versus curiosity about how the leaves fall. Yeah, getting really specific about each of those individual things is super helpful. Um, what happens next? What comes after that first chunk?
Thunder crumples the sky, lightning tears at it.
Great.
So
So
I
you
think
have this opening, and then you have this like suddenly moment. So you kind of have this opening, and you can explore some different rhythms for that opening and some specifics of those images, and then you have this suspense, yeah, which I think you could take an even bigger pause there. Give yourself permission to play with taking a longer, build that suspense for us, and then you can really dig in on what comes next. Yeah, this dramatic moment of the thunder cracking. You want to just give us a handful of lines from the transition there?
tugging at the twigs, pouring from the branches, and suddenly the birds are still. Thunder crumples the sky, lightning tears at it, and now the rain. the rain thudding implacable, the wind reveling in the confusion of the great pines.
That's awesome. That's great. It's cool to see you getting into it. Um, is that is it implacable? Is that how
Implacable?
you pronounce that word?
I don't know.
Um, like as in unable to be placated? What is the word? Is that it?
Maybe.
Say it in the what's the line again?
The rain thudding implacable.
Implacable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The rain is unstoppable, is what you're saying. And I think that let's see here.
Implacable.
Yeah, plaque. Um,
Sounds weird.
it does, doesn't it? But that is how you pronounce that word. As in unable to be placated. Um, unappeasable, unforgiving, unstoppable. Um, that's great. I mean, yeah, I see you getting into it. I see even like I see your hands coming up, you know? I see it, like it's gonna feel silly, and you can do this one when no one's watching, but with all these great images, like the sweeping, and then the leaves were fall, like just get it in your body so that eventually it doesn't become that in the full performance. You're not doing that, but we see it fully embodied. Yeah, how can you describe these images without getting fully involved in your body? I mean, if you're doing trying to describe how implacable the rain is with your arms at your sides, it's challenging. So you have, maybe hands go up and you see it there, um, without demonstrating, without the rain does this and the leaves do this and um, but just go further. Just allow yourself to go further. Record yourself, being silly with it and overdoing it. Um, yeah, but yeah, the specifics are already really great there, and think about how those why there's a reason why the author chose the words that they chose. They communicate meaning, but they also give us sounds. So yeah, no, it's just awesome stuff, Jasper. Thanks so much. I think we're probably about close to our time here, Monica. What do you think?
Yeah, I was just gonna gracefully break in to say that our time is up, but I am so pleased, Jasper, that you and Zane took this opportunity. Look at all the individualized attention you received as your prize for turning up today. And Kaisa and Riley, both of you, thank you for all you did to support these two. And for anyone listening to this recording later, hopefully you gained something from it. Those were all great pieces of advice you shared, Riley. And, you know, uh, everyone's going to be the better for it. So thank you, everyone,
Thank you.
for this time today. And yeah, I will be in touch with all of you. So
As
have a
will
great
I.
rest of the day. Yes. Have
Thank
a
you.
great rest of the day.
Thanks, y'all.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you guys.
We can't
Good
Thank
wait.
you,
luck.
We
Have
can't
Riley.
wait to see
fun.
you.
Have fun. Don't
Thank
forget
you.
to enjoy.
See you at
Yeah.
state.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.